Thank you, Chair.
Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr Wilson, and your staff for coming.
Thank you.
Small business, we know, is Australia's largest employer.
Yes.
It's the engine room of our economy. The previous Small Business Ombudsman in a report said, quote, "A tax system that works for small business." That was the title of the report. In February 2021, at page 6, recommendation 21, stated that the government must undertake tax reform to prohibit the ATO from charging penalties and interest, issuing garnishee notices, or instigating other recovery action on tax arising from a decision that is disputed.
Yep.
We support this change, as the ATO's current policy could kill many struggling small businesses, and it's not fair. It's completely unjust. On May 13th, 2021, the Honourable Stuart Robert, MP and Minister for Employment, Workforce, Skills, Small and Family Business, said in Parliament that the government too would back small business over the ATO. The message is clear. In your new role as Ombudsman, will you be advocating for this tax reform? And if so, what are you doing?
Yes, and yes, we are advocating for a very thoughtful use of the enormous powers the tax office has.
They are enormous.
They are very substantial.
They make laws, basically.
Well, I mean, the thing is, we've been consistent on three fronts, Senator. One is they've got quite a lot of discretion about how they use it. So we've been trying to put a spotlight on how that discretion is exercised so that it's consistent and thoughtful. Deputy Commissioner Deb Jenkins and I meet regularly about our experience with tax office interactions. I think you might have missed my absolutely gripping opening remark where I did touch on some of these issues, Senator, where we've had punitive penalties of 200% for late payments, payments of superannuation guarantee contributions being made in a timely way but not processed in a timely way, and that can trigger a liability. The tax officer saying to us, their former position of these are the rules, we've not got a lot of wiggle room with those 200% penalties. They're now reflecting on that and dialing back that a little bit and putting more discretion that's less punitive into their decision making. Secondly, there's a measure been recently announced that an aggrieved taxpayer can, seeking a decision from the AAT, can actually ask the AAT to direct the tax office to suspend recovery action. So you'd know well if they'd judged that we were liable for a tax amount, they can pursue the recovery of it even though it's disputed. Exactly. And in some cases we've heard that can limit the aggrieved taxpayer's capacity to argue their own case. So we think,
and to stay in business.
Yeah, that's right. And so we welcome that announcement. We thought that's a good step in the right direction. There's also scope for them to come to our office. So if there's a dispute a small business has with the tax office, our concierge service can do three things. One, if we think it's really odd, we can suggest to the tax office they might want to have another look at this because we think they've perhaps made an error. Secondly, there is a mechanism to get fresh eyes review within the tax office so that someone else can have a look at the assessment to see where that judgment...
That is a fundamental problem because the assessor can sometimes be the reviewer of the assessment.
And we were wary about how effective that measure was going to be. It was trialled initially, but the feedback we got was overwhelmingly positive from the small businesses that used it, even those that didn't get the outcome that they wanted. So we were in that tax report that you're referring to, we were urging for that to be maintained as a permanent service. So that's there. And then
so you're advocating for structural change in that way? Well,
and really a thoughtfulness around the way the tax office uses those awesome powers that it has. So we surface case studies and think, maybe this could have been handled a bit better. Deputy Commissioner Deb Jenkins is a wonderful ally. I think the Inspector General of Taxation is doing some good work as well around understanding the nature of the tax debt. It's often said small businesses is a big tax debt problem. Well, in total numbers, it's a big number, but it's spread across an awful lot of small businesses. And then there's an awful lot more that are paying, that are fulfilling their obligations in a very timely way, and that should be celebrated as well. The last one, Senator, is the idea of this AAT review. So we offer, as part of that service, and it was touched on earlier, that $1.4 million administered funds, we can have an aggrieved small business taxpayer come to us, say they're not happy, say why they're not happy. We will collate relevant material, suggest to them maybe they might be misreading the tea leaves, or we might suggest to the tax office they might have misread their obligations, see if we can get an outcome. If that doesn't happen, we may support and arrange a review by a tax expert. There's about 20 around the country that we might refer that small business taxpayer to, where they can give an assessment of their prospects of success at the AAT, and then we may also provide a role in assisting that small business taxpayer at the AAT if they decide to proceed to that point of challenge.
Thank you. That's a comprehensive reply. I know one expert who's dealt with tax and small business for many, many years, and also the next topic I'm going to get onto. He estimates that the $25 billion that small business owes to the ATO comprises 60% penalty and 40% principal and interest. Yeah. And of course, the penalty builds on that interest. So it's huge.
And I think there's an Inspector General report coming out on that very matter to break up the client group tax debt, and then there's some interest in what the components are, like what you described. So I'd encourage you to keep an eye out for that report, Senator. That is also a gripping read.
Thank you. I just mentioned the topic of my second question is, what can be done to reduce industrial relations complexity for small business? You know, the Fair Work Act is about that thick when it's printed out on a piece of paper. That's horrendous for any small business employee, any small business employer to get their head around.
Yep.
And we need to restore the employer-employee relationship, surely.
Yeah, it's difficult for many small businesses who want to do the right thing to know precisely what that is.
Yep.
I did point earlier to Senator O'Neill's question around small business measures in the budget. One of the RegTech measures is to actually try and help small businesses navigate the award system. There's also an advice line for small businesses that aren't a member of an industry association. They're not of a size where they've got an HR professional that they can get some advice. Our agency has also put out a report about simplification, and for the purposes of full disclosure, Senator, I actually authored a report for the Fair Work Commissioner Judge, His Honour Justice Ian Ross, about practical steps I thought could be taken within the current law as it is to make the system work better for smaller employers.
Could we get a copy of that, please?
Yeah, that also is a gripping read. I will make sure
that you receive that.
Yeah.
So that addresses my next question, which is what better ways are there for small business that are not limited just to simply developing a small business award? That'd be one thing on the list, I'm sure, but are they contained in your list?
Yeah, there was, yes. It didn't actually advocate for a small business award. It actually
what other measures?
Advocated for a small business annexure to each award that was basically the essential elements that a smaller employer needed to turn their mind to. It made some recommendations around the effectiveness of the Fair Dismissal Code. It did speak to the formation of a small business division within the Fair Work Commission so that their procedures are right-sized and relevant to small employers. It also called out the impact of the club, dare I say, industry associations, the legal profession and unions that actually revel in the complexity. It makes their insights and expertise very valuable.
Add to them the employer industry groups.
Well,
you've got the people who benefit from problems and no solutions.
Well, it did point out that they probably are less concerned about complexity, whereas a small business owner and leader, he or she can create a great innovation and change the very nature of society, and then needs to get help to understand what their workplace obligations are because it's so complex, it's so nuanced. It was putting the point forward that very intelligent small business owners shouldn't need to rely on external advice to be sure-footed in their compliance with their employment obligations.
Okay, well, that's taking care of my next question. Are there still gaps between your office and the Fair Work Ombudsman that need to be improved? For example, small business support?
Well, they're doing more, and I've met with the Fair Work Ombudsman. We had a panel of regulators. Senator, it was a cold night in Canberra, and I'm sure we took an enormous amount of the audience away from home and away when we were talking about regulatory challenge. It was just a real hoot, Senator. But we were working quite collaboratively. They've got some good resources. One of the things we can do is amplify and give higher visibility to those resources and also work carefully with them. They have their own small business helpline. I actually launched it in a former life, so I'm quite familiar with the need for good advice, but we also thought there were some structural opportunities at the Fair Work Commission that could work alongside the Fair Work Ombudsman and make the system work better for smaller employers.
Okay. Next one is a specific around some of the broader areas you've been talking about. Do you get feedback from small business that the Fair Work system is too expensive for small businesses? For example, not just the complexity and the cost that entails and the distraction out of the business, but paying go-away money because they're too busy to defend claims, for example, those kinds of things?
Yeah,
and employees on the same note?
They tend not to come directly to us, but when we're out on the road, Senator, it is a vivid topic for those that have been through it.
And it applies to employees, not just small business
that's
employers.
Correct. And one of the things that we were highlighting in our work is that the award system and the power imbalance assumes that the employer has got enormous resources and capability and the employee hasn't. In many small businesses, it actually can be the reverse. An employee with the support of an advisor or a representative, perhaps a union that can take cases and to appeal over and over again, probably has more horsepower and resources than the small business will ever have. And that was one of the recommendations we sought to address in my report, not the agencies, but the report I provided His Honour Justice Ian Ross.
Could you just recap? I think Senator Brockman asked this similar question. What are the main issues facing small business and what are you doing to sort these out? I know you mentioned bank loans.
Yeah, well, access to finance remains a big issue. Insurance remains a big issue. As Senator Hume was alluding to, the focus on digital engagement is very important. Yet we see a spotty level of engagement. I would hazard a guess that a significant minority are less open to the delicious possibilities that deeper digital engagement can offer. They may have been of my vintage, sir, where there were vendors promising the world when I had more hair that tech would change my business, and it didn't. And we often hear about that, and those people now at a more mature age, still in the economy, might be hesitant to take up some of the digital engagement opportunities that are there. So that's a big issue for us. We still think government procurement offers great potential for greater small business engagement, and we think that's a key priority for us. Women's entrepreneurship is also an area we're quite interested in, and I'm also quite evangelical about alternative dispute resolution. It's interesting in Australia, a lot of small businesses turn to the regulator to defend their own economic interest because they're frightened of cost order gorillas if they pursue legal recourse. They're just worried, so they turn to the regulator. This is quite unusual in other comparable jurisdictions. The people whose economic interest has been infringed upon are very up and about defending their own interests and are less reliant on the regulator. We think there might be something in that, where the way the court system operates, power imbalances may well be amplified throughout the legal process. Me as a small business, you as a behemoth business owner, you've got 5 QCs, I've got, my solicitor, and we're having a discussion and you're reminding me that if I lose, I get to pay for your crew. That can be a real disincentive to engage in that court-based process. We think we can probably come up with some better avenues. That's a priority for us as well.
What about tax? Not just personal tax, but business tax, and especially the complexity of the tax system.
We put a report out, when was that? May I consult the Deputy Ombudsman who was here when I wasn't? So
it's February.
That just rolled off. It's quite fresh, Senator. I can make sure we refer that inquiry report to you as well, and your winter reading list in Canberra will be abundant, sir.
Thank you. Based upon your experience, although it's only limited for a few months, should the role or powers of the Small Business Ombudsman be enhanced, and if so, in what regard? Yeah,
we think there's some scope for having more nudge ability to get disputing parties around a mediation table and potentially into arbitration to get matters sorted out quickly. so that businesses can get back to
What
business.
sort of power would that look like?
Well, at the moment, whilst we carry the title of Ombudsman, we have no determinative power. We can't decide anything. All we can do is facilitate and enable a process and put the parties together and give them wise advice. We hope that they see it's in everyone's interest to sort it out quickly. Where there's some few areas where we think a little bit of nudge potential might encourage those parties to engage in good faith and get those disputes resolved quickly, affordably, and get business back to business.
Okay. Since the last round of Senate estimates, which is, 3 months ago,
Yep.
Has there been any work done to identify opportunities for small business, including red tape reduction and other initiatives, business codes? Would it like to be reviewed and updated to ensure fairness for employers and employees?
Yes, we've engaged on a couple of reviews that other portfolios are doing. We've also been active on mutual skills recognition across jurisdictions, which was a measure included in the budget, so that if you're a tradesperson in one state, you could readily ply your trade in another and have your qualifications carried over. We've also had some discussions with industry associations about their pain points, particularly where they might be multi-jurisdictional. Some examples, sir, may include, well, you've seen we've been active in the Australia Post area, where they felt complex and differing state regulation was a reason for them to announce that they intended to discontinue perishable goods delivery. We said, well, don't discontinue it. Let's work out what these regulatory challenges are that you speak of, and so we're engaged in that process as well. The areas of...
What about review of the business fair dismissal code from both an employer and employee perspective to make it fairer for both?
That was a recommendation in our report.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, to make it function as it was intended,
Right.
might be a more accurate description.
Which protects both
Yep.
parties,
Yep.
employers and employees. Has the Small Business Ombudsman had the opportunity to engage in the development and review of regulation and information guidelines for small business in relation to casual conversion? That's the conversion of casual employees to permanent employees.
No, sir, we haven't.
Are you aware of the casual conversion guidelines?
Vividly so, sir.
Are they fit for purpose?
Well, there's some positive response from small businesses that there's now clarity around that. There was some chagrin that other reforms could perhaps have been included in that legislation that weren't. So that's the feedback we've had.
So are you passing that on?
Well, anyone who asks us, we're not shy, Senator. We will pass on our feedback.
To the Fair Work Commission?
Yeah, at that stage that we haven't engaged with them on that topic. The last discussion we had with the Fair Work Commission was at an officer level, just on things they're doing to streamline their processes to make them more accessible for small business.
So they're responsible. I know it's the Fair Work Ombudsman that's responsible for the
Correct.
casual conversion guidelines. Have
So
you
the
had
Commission
discussions
sets the
with them?
rules and the Ombudsman make sure that they're being implemented.
Have you had
and
discussions with the Fair Work Ombudsman
only in
about?
terms of their guidance material that
Yes.
they make available. Yeah, but not on that particular topic. You asked me very specifically about.
Will you be having that?
Casual conversions? I can add that to my list. Yeah, because I catch. I think I even chair a federal regulator agency group meeting where we all get together and work out who's doing what. And
So you're the Ombudsman's Ombudsman.
I am. I think I'm the passionate but neutral chair amongst powerful regulators, sir.
Okay. One final question, Chair. We've now got the term circuit breaker
Yes.
instead of lockdown.
Yes.
Which to me and others seems to be an attempt to bypass the growing resentment towards lockdowns. And they've belted small business now for about 1.25 years. Not for the whole time, but intermittently along that time. A taxi operator taxi driver in Sydney on Friday, when I went home from Canberra, said to me that it's not only belted his business on Friday, the sudden shutdown in Victoria, but it's affected coffee shops, restaurant owners, hotels, motels, a whole swath of businesses, all with no advance warning.
I
And so the
touched on this in my opening remarks, Senator. They're not
I'm gonna have to go
Gettysburg.
back and read them,
yes,
aren't
but they were there, and it did point to the fact that was a circuit breaker lockdown, which created probably some expectation to be short. But now there's a discussion it might be longer. My point to the committee was, in my view, it highlighted the need for greater certainty and predictability for business about what different types of lockdowns would trigger in terms of support and other measures that business could count on. Because at the moment there's not a clear menu, there's not a clear set of trigger points where people go, okay, we're now having one of those lockdowns, call it what you will, but we know the suite of measures that accompany that would give small businesses good clarity, and it would also identify who's expected to do what when these events occur. And that's not just government. I mean, at what point does the conversation move to what's the finance sector doing to accommodate these businesses? All the issues around leasing, that was all part of it, and I'm from Victoria, Senator, and to be here in person, I didn't go home, so because I wouldn't be allowed back. But that's the sort of thing that we think
and then
would
we
be
see
most helpful.
packages just listening, driving home one evening, listening to Talkback Radio, which in Brisbane sometimes carries the feed from Sydney.
Right.
And there was a Sydney sider saying, okay, we get the $100 voucher for travel to Cairns, staying in Cairns, but why the hell would I go to Cairns and risk 2 weeks in a lockdown afterwards at $3,000 just to save $100?
Well,
I mean, those kinds of things, and WA, Queensland and Victoria in particular have been capricious with these lockdowns. And you're getting much resentment from the small business on that.
Yeah, absolutely we are. I mean, they're infuriated and bewildered by what is sensed to be inconsistencies across jurisdictions. Proportionality to responses, why some jurisdictions treat certain events that look to a small business owner's eyes as very similar as somewhere else, and that's treated differently. That's not sure-footed conditions for a business owner to navigate, and that's why some improved predictability about trigger points and what sort of support they can count on would be, I think, a very positive step as we learn to live with COVID.
The Chair's giving me the signal to wind up, so I'll just
I
say
think he's
this.
giving me the signal, Senator, so I will...
It's a general signal.
The United
In my
Nations,
general direction?
just a final comment, the United Nations World Health Organisation, which I happen to think is a dishonest, corrupt and incompetent organisation.
Can I take that as a comment, Senator?
Yes,
Thank you.
you don't have to give your opinion. Even the World Health Organisation has said that lockdowns are meant to be used as a last resort, initially only, just to get control of the virus. Does small business look upon the use of lockdowns as an inability of the states to get control of the virus? So the virus is essentially managing the state economy rather than the state managing the virus.
Senator, you're leading me, and I might let that one just go through the keeper if you're okay.
Thank you.
And-
I think we need to treat that one as a comment. Thank you,
Chair, can I
Senator
just use
Roberts.
that, though, cheekily to flag that the United Nations Micro, Small and Medium Enterprise Day of Recognition is coming up in June. So that would be a great opportunity to say thank you to the small businesses and family enterprises you count on. That would be a good thing coming out of the UN, and I might hand back to you, Chair.
Well, Mr. Bilson, I don't think anyone would be left with any doubt about your passion for the small business sector and your suitability for the role. Thank you very much for appearing for the first time. I'm sure it's not the last. We will see you again in a few months, very likely.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Senators.
And thank you very much for your time, and I wish you all safe travels back to wherever you are heading.
Thank you.